And will the clerk do the roll?
Commissioner Flynn is absent. Cooper? Present. Davis Carter is absent. Bigelow is absent. Doherty?
Here.
Binder? Present. Wright? Here. Harry?
Here.
Rubenstein is absent. Sandberg? Is absent. Smith? Absent. Oh, I'm sorry. Secretary Garcia?
Present?
Secretary White? Here. Yeah, oh,
If they don't-
Commissioner Kodak, sorry. With 8 present.
Here.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda's passed. I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. There isn't a chair's report other than what's in front of you. However, I would like to, if Clerk Carl would like to present the slides on the guidehouse project. I would
Thank you.
invite him.
Madam Chair, I'll just thank Casey Carl, I'm the city clerk. What you have in front of you are 3 slides on a single piece of paper. This was my way of updating you on the outside research requests that the group had discussed 3 meetings ago, I believe. This is a contract with Guidehouse. Guidehouse is the corporation the city has used for other research projects, including the compensation analysis that was done 2 years ago involving mayor and council. They're doing a repeat of that same study this year because it's in the year of an election that the council can consider any changes in compensation for its elected officials to take place with the next term in January. So they are already underway on that update to the study. I reached out and asked if they would be able and willing to do a research project involving the scope of services as I understood it from this group, which you see on slide 2. They said they could and would. That's much more their wheelhouse than is compensation analysis, which is a smaller part of their work. As I described it to them, we were looking for a select number of city councils in comparative jurisdictions. The unifying factors that had to be true were it was an executive mayor governance structure that included a full-time city council or legislative body. In the case of a joint city-county an entity, they had to operate with standing committees and have their own independent resources, meaning budget and staff. And the jurisdiction would be one that was already included in prior research studies that have been done with the city. I met with them today to confirm this. They're planning to do an original report of up to 15 pages that summarizes their analysis of those comparable jurisdictions. They're happy to provide a presentation to the Charter Commission at the appropriate time. I think they'll probably be complete with their research within the next 2 or 3 months. The indicators that we asked to be included within the scope of the study are shown on the final slide. So in terms of elections and representation, they will be looking at the election methodology used in each of these jurisdictions. FTP meaning first past the post, or the traditional rank of how we conduct elections, ranked choice voting like we use, or another elections methodology. The type meaning at large, by district, or some mixture of the two, or other if there is one. And then representation, number of constituents per member. In terms of council structure, looking at the size of council relative to the population, any term length or limits that are provided, the officers and structure of leadership for the council body, the basic job description, meaning what official duties they have in comparison to ours, the powers and authority of the legislative body relative to the executive, the coordination and communication existing between council and executive or administration, the council's quorum and its meeting frequency, several points to look at in terms of the council committees and their structure and operation and process, council resources meaning staff, the type of staff and the number and the functions that are provided, staff titles, roles, and responsibilities. This was an interesting point. Influence or decision-making, authority from the legislative staff vis-a-vis the executive or administration, and then budgets and other dedicated funding or resources for the council body. They also, through their interviews with those comparable jurisdictions, would look for gaps that aren't covered within the data points we've identified. And those gaps would obviously be identified by the jurisdictions and open-ended question. Are there things we didn't ask? And then also challenges or opportunities as they operate within executive legislative structure, outcomes and effectiveness. So I felt that was very broad and would get us a lot of data back. So happy to answer any questions, but this is what I confirmed with them today. They will begin this process next week.
Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Commissioner Dodd?
Is this presentation that you envision, would that be a presentation solely to the Charter Commission, or would the City Council, I mean, I would assume that they would be very interested in these findings too. Could we share that with them?
I'm assuming they would be, and it's public data. Am I asking them to come present to the council? No, this is research for the Charter Commission. So if the council's interested in it, either they can watch your meeting, or they can get it out of LIMS, which is public data, or you could certainly send them that. But this is research being done for the Charter Commission.
Thank you, yes.
You said 2 to 3 months for the study. Is that study and compiling their findings in the report? Okay.
There, through the chair, I'll just say 2 or 3 months is what they anticipate before they turn in a final report and say we're done.
And not seeing any further questions? Okay. So for today's meeting really is the epitome of what this group was created. It's to align the charter with the ordinance. And so I will just make a couple of short notes, comments, and then kind of suggest a procedure that we could go around and offer comment, offer feedback and thoughts. So my first note is just a reminder, this is what we kept reminding ourselves at the first government structure work group, is that this is about the structure of city government. It's not about who's in there now, it's not about personalities, it's about what is in our charter and stays in our charter. So what I propose for this meeting, since we're looking at Article 7, which is how the mayor appointments, council confirmation process, and right now, what's before us is two processes in our handy dandy charts. What's under the current charter and what is in ordinance. So what I would like to do is go around and do a round robin and have people weigh in on one of those, and we welcome the development of a third option, which would then presumably be someplace in between. One thing we thought about, both in the last government structure work group, and again, this brings us back to the considerations for what the appointment confirmation, kind of central to the appointment and confirmation piece, is to keep in mind, what is the public concerned about? What issues come before the city that the public is concerned about? What affects public lives? I mean, garbage affects public lives, but what really affects people and what impacts neighborhoods? So those three questions are pretty central to the importance of maybe something that a legislative council, who in this structure is intended to really focus on constituent services, would hopefully be kind of tough considerations. But I just throw those out. They aren't, this isn't by any means mandatory criteria for us to consider. This is just kind of sharing how, the thought behind the government structure work group from the first iteration to this, kind of bringing us to a centered place to really look at who the mayor would appoint and the council confirm. And I'll also ask that we do round robin, and you can pass if you're still thinking, and we can come back to you. But just to make sure that people kind of have enough time to process and discuss, if needed, and it's highly likely that I will ask that, people who haven't spoken or haven't shared a lot, do so we can hear from those who have something to say. And if you don't wish to speak, that's fine, but I just want to give that offer to everybody. So, with that, I would like to, who's gonna?
I knew I should have said it. Fine, Madam Chair. And I've been looking at this list, I think we first got it some time ago. And I'd be interested in hearing what people thought about three of the offices that are out here. The first would be CPED, because I think that's the economic, the old MCDA plus. I think they have such a wide range of responsibilities and services, development, planning. I would give the council a bigger role in deciding who should run CPED. The second one would be Public Works, because Public Works is something that affects all of us every week when the garbage comes, and the streets and so on. So I think that's absolutely vital, almost as important as what do we call now, the control of the controller now, or the coordinator. So, but I think, and then I would be interested in, this is to me less important, but regulatory services, because that affects so many businesses, and we want to make sure that people in that have integrity, but also can deal with the public and with the businesses that have to come before them. So those would be the three I would like to hear discussion about.
And those are the ones that are in addition to the middle column.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Perry.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this as well, and I think that I am comfortable with the, in case you'll have to correct me, what is the CAO? I'm not supposed to say that, right?
The city operations officer?
No, the proposed amendment, the CAO.
Oh, no, they're not CAO, they're just, this is what's in the ordinance.
Okay, so I just say ordinance then. Okay.
Emerge from the cloud, author list.
So
Right.
everybody cross off their little column heading.
So I would support the three direct reports to the mayor under the ordinance. And I actually would not do, and the fire chief and the police chief, I would not do the other charter departments at this point. And I'll tell you why. When I was campaigning for this, as many of us were, one of the things that was most compelling to the people that I talked to, and I said in my front lawn, and said, I will talk, if you want to talk about this, I'm ready to talk. So I would, and people really wanted to talk about it. They were engaged. The most compelling argument was the one that said, these people can't operate properly with 14 bosses. And if you are approving, if you have council approving those people, they then are naturally going to be, in my mind, if I was in that situation, I would say, I gotta get approved again, I got another boss and my direct report. And so I think it is for that reason that I would not include the others. Right now, I can call up the director of public works, I do, as the head of a business association. And that wouldn't change who, no matter who appointed them. I could still call up the director of public works and get a response. So I think it goes back to, again, that 14 bosses, which was really a keystone argument in the one that we made, that brings me to recommending that we do the three, the community safety commissioner, the city operations officer, and the city attorney.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do people know what the 14 bosses phrase comes from? Do you? Okay, good, just checking.
I do. I
Um,
don't know if Commissioner Cooper.
Okay.
I-
You do too. Okay,
Yep.
good.
So it got out into the general public as something that really was compelling.
The beta testers. Commissioner Ginder.
Thank you. I'm looking at this from a slightly different perspective in the sense of I have some of my own views on what this should be, but as I'm looking at this and I have missed a couple of meetings because I've been out of state, that I have been tasked that in the future when we kind of get this settled a little bit, that we'll have a joint meeting with hopefully the mayor and or the council. And in order to make that a fruitful discussion, I kind of envisioned something where we present them something that says, this is what we're thinking about. And it may be in the line of three options. So it may be, option one is keep the current. Option two, which was the proposal that people have been looking at, which includes three directors and then the fire and police chief. And then a third option, if people feel that there is something that is in between that, or some other option, it might be, we think they should appoint 50 people, whatever option we're going to present, so that when we go to the mayor and the council, they say, okay, this is what we're thinking about, one of these three lines of thought. And what are your thoughts on this? Now, we may have an idea from the mayor what he or she would think it is, and we may have an idea from the council, but we give them the opportunity to play off of some proposals that we're thinking about and to hear their thoughts. So with that kind of background, I might say that I'm generally in favor of the smaller appointment process, which would be the three commissioners and the city attorney, or two commissioners and the city attorney, and then the police and fire chief. But I understand the argument that Commissioner Kozak has talked about, at least as far as public works and CPID, and the fact that they touch on so many parts and operations of the city. So for me, if I were to go and have three options to present to the council, it would be the first one, the current charter process that we have that's listed right there. The proposal that did not come from the city attorney's office, but was put forward as trying to put everything together under the current system to say, take a look at this and what, this is what we gathered everything together, this is what it looks like. Or a third option, which for me would be what the Commissioner Kozak outlined, except for the regulatory service. So I would say a third option would be the commissioners with the three big top positions, public works, CPED, and fire and police.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Doherty.
Thank you. I guess I have a number of thoughts, and I also have a couple of questions. Can I put out those questions too at the same time?
Yes.
All right. So I guess my first question is, with regard to the middle column, My understanding is that the current city council does not approve of all of these, but my question is, does the mayor? Is this middle column?
To the chair, I'll tell you that the far column on the left is the positions that are nominated by the mayor and approved by the council, with the exception that, where it says city coordinator goes away.
Well, I understand that.
You have to add the community safety commissioner and the city operations officer to that column.
Yes.
And that's the total column that today, you asked, does the mayor make all these? Yes, he makes all those, and they're all subject to the council.
No, let me better explain my question. If we move to the proposed ordinance amendment, has the mayor looked at that and said, yes, I agree that the city council should confirm the top three and the fire chief and the police chief? Does
Commissioner?
anybody-
Thank you for your question. I think we would like to stay on
Okay.
the topic of looking at the three, and again, not looking at
Well-
personalities or who's there now.
But it's not personalities. Part of my question is, these are the people, the mayor and the city council and the community safety commissioner and the city operations officer who need to deal with this, who need to actually do the work.
And it may
and-
not be the
and
current
part-
mayor and the current city council.
Right, but it will be the mayor and the city council. And part of my feeling about it is, it's important to know where the pushback is. And it's important to know why there is pushback from the mayor, from the city council. But I'll leave that for now, because I understand your point. My next question is, in terms of the city assessor and the director of public works, director of civil rights, commissioner of health, executive director of the CPED, and the regulatory service and emergency management, my question is, are those appointed by the mayor, or are those appointed by the city operation officer or the community safety commission?
Do you want me to answer?
Yes.
No,
Today,
not today, under the proposed change,
But that would be under the ordinance.
The middle column,
under the middle column.
they would be done by the mayor.
They would,
if the charter changed,
It's a charter change.
there's two different things,
Yes.
Commissioner. Until the charter is changed, they will continue to be appointed by the mayor. Under the ordinance, this middle column is the ordinance.
Yes.
So the ordinance anticipates that at some point, if the charter is changed,
yes,
then the mayor would only appoint, and the council would only confirm, the community safety commissioner, the city operations officer, the city attorney.
that's my question. And then the community safety commissioner and the city operation officer would appoint, other than the fire chief and the.
Would
police
appoint
chief,
everyone else,
Would appoint everyone else.
including the police chief, fire chief.
All right, so, given that, my position, my thoughts of this are, we are then moving from a situation where elected officials appointed these 9 positions. We are moving to that, to no elected official, because the community safety commissioner is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council, as is the city operation officer. They appoint all the rest, so we move from a situation where we had elected officials appointing and approving all 9 of these, to where they only do 2 of the people who appoint all the rest of these. And to me, that's problematic in terms of having constituents have input into these positions, so that's problematic. And I guess my feeling about that is it's problematic to Julie Doherty, but who cares, you know? If the city council and the mayor agree on a way that this city will function the best if these appointments are done, I would like to hear that, because that would definitely influence my feeling about how this should all go forward. Because it's important to get input from both the mayor and the city council on what they think works and why.
Which is,
That's the kind of the point of the process, that I think, of outlining at least three, to focus the discussion, is to have at least three options that say, you know, what, do you like this one and why? Do you like this one and why or why not? And then this one, why or why not? To have a focused discussion. If, I don't wanna walk in to a meeting with the mayor and the council, whether it's separate or joint, and say, tell us what you'd like to see in the future as far as appointment powers.
No, because we've got this as it's laid out right now, and as far, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Kozak that these three issues are important, but I'm not so certain that the Director of Public Works and Director of Civil Rights and Commissioner of Health aren't also important for those same reasons in terms of constituent services, et cetera. So I guess, you know, part of it is wanting to hear the input on all of them, for the same reason that Commissioner Kozak is concerned with these three issues, is because of the importance of of the significance of their work on the city.
That's exactly right, that's why we want their input, and ultimately it will come back to us to say, we've heard the input,
Mhm.
based on our prior experiences, you know, in formulating this executive system, executive mayor, legislative system. You know, we've heard this, how do we think, as the charter commission, to best effectuate what we've heard and what's the process? But, I mean, that's the point of the meetings, is to get their feedback on these ideas.
All right, so then my position would be, I believe that each of these should be confirmed by the council, because that would give the broadest support, the broadest impact of constituents on the folks who are working here. But I can be easily swayed by reasons given by the mayor and the city council as to why that's not necessary.
thank you, Commissioner Doherty. Commissioner Cooper.
I agree with a lot of Commissioner Kozak's comments about those three departments in particular having a lot of touch points with constituents, and so I think that those are, I feel particularly strongly about those being, there being virtue in council involvement in those positions. I have a question specifically about the city attorney's office under the new structure. I think this is part of more of a conversation of, for the city attorney's office to talk about, and people who have experience in the city attorney's office to discuss. I think with the new government structure, there's the potential for like an actual conflict of interest to arise, with the city attorney being the sole legal counsel for both the mayor and the council. The new government structure dividing those responsibilities, where there are some oversight responsibilities through the city council. I anticipate there being the potential of like an actual conflict of interest, where the city charter says there's one office that has, you know, a limited budget and limited staff power, and I don't want to get into a situation where there actually is a conflict and now no one has legal representation because the city attorney's office is conflicted out, and I don't have enough experience with that, so I'm curious.
If I may, the city attorney is, the charter says, is the sole legal representation for the city and all of its officers and all of it. That language has been in for now over 100 years.
Yeah.
And the way it works is, when you think of conflict of interest, it's different in the public sector than it is in the private sector. So the public sector is allowed greater latitude in representing clients that might in the private sector look like a conflict. And the Supreme Court in Minnesota has addressed that issue and has talked about, because of some things you've identified, smaller staffs, less capital involvement to handle all this stuff, that they have the ability to handle things that might look a little bit funny in the private sector. But there is still the ethical obligation within the attorney's office not to take cases where there are direct conflicts. So much like any law firm, if there's an issue in which there is an actual direct conflict, so for an employee is being sued and they've been disciplined by the city and the department. So we couldn't represent both of them. And so we would typically say, we will represent the city and we will provide, in accordance with our ethical obligations, the city will provide counsel for the person in which there's a conflict. So that is done routinely. It has been done in cases, for example, even when council members have been sued where there is a conflict in the representation of the city and the council member. To be candid, the one that always people worry about is what if the whole council wants to sue the mayor or this kind of thing, which is a theoretical possibility, and it does occur in other cities. But historically, the city has been able to manage that. City attorney's office has been able to manage that. But we've looked at this and what is the issue here? How is it resolvable, and how do we handle it without having to have lawsuits? But in my experience, I would hear that once in a while. I said, well, we're going to have to get outside counsel, we're going to sue each other, and say, well, let's sit down and talk about this, and what are the goals here, and what are we trying to do? And we've never had that issue. Not to say that it could never happen, but I don't see that the situation is much different under the new language than it is under the old language. The only difference now is the city attorney is still approved by the city council. And he or she still has that responsibility to be their legal advisor as well as the mayor's legal advisor. And so you will know that municipal attorneys are quite deft in handling what can oftentimes be a complicated responsibility to multiple clients. Probably more than you wanted to hear, but I know it's an issue that people think about. It's not new within the city attorney's office and more within the cities. So I hope that gives you some.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Kurt.
Can I offer you another just perspective? This doesn't deal with conflict, but the unique role of the city attorney. So the mayor has created a cabinet, a new governing structure, which are these three officers at the top, right, who report directly to the mayor. But the city attorney also sits on, it's not called a cabinet, but we call it council leadership. And so council leadership is the council president, the council vice president, the city clerk, the city auditor, and the city attorney. And so those are the three who are under the legislative branch, right? The attorneys in both camps, if you will. So the city attorney sits formally on the mayor's cabinet. The city attorney also holds a seat on council leadership and serves both.
I would just add that policy conflicts are constant. The true legal conflicts are virtually non-existent in that relationship. The legal advice given to both is the same and consistent and transparent and needs to be. Otherwise, we have constant, I'll call my attorney, they'll talk to your attorney, and that's unworkable. So having a single city attorney that's responsible to all of them is actually key to avoiding that.
I feel like I should channel Commissioner Smith in saying that the League of Minnesota Cities has a whole attorney staff available to cities to help them through a variety of questions. So I think we're pretty covered. Commissioner Smith works for the League of Minnesota Cities. Did you?
Those were all my questions right now.
You didn't have a choice out of options?
You said.
Oh, I generally agree with Commissioner Kozak's.
Okay, I just
Yep.
wanted to
Yep.
double check. Commissioner Nye.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this has been a really helpful conversation. Before I offer comments, I have one question, and it's more of a historical question, so let's ask it, and anybody can answer it. has there been a time when when any appointee by the mayor in the first column wasn't appointed by the council? Or when they didn't vote? Or chose not to vote?
I'm trying to think of specific examples, but I'm pretty confident the answer is yes, that there were people that were not confirmed. I'm trying to think that.
And I don't need like specific names or anything, like, I'm just curious
Yes,
if.
yeah, but yes. Yeah,
I believe that at some point historically, the director of emergency management was not approved by the council. That may have been for 2012.
And wasn't appointed by the mayor.
I'm not certain of that.
I do know that.
But this is due to a complex interaction of state law, special legislation, and
Charter?
and charter and our ordinances. And the director of emergency management is sort of an outlier in this regard, but I'm pretty sure that historically they were not confirmed by council.
And there have also been cases where, after the initial hearing process, and, it's been held over, and people have withdrawn.
Yes.
Where they kind of look at, well, no, if it doesn't look good, I'm not going to
Sure.
continue.
That
with
was
this.
my kind of add-on is there any occasion in the first column where people have just withdrawn?
And, well, I guess then a follow-up. Currently, or I guess under the left column, are those positions allowed to serve after, to serve immediately upon nomination? Or do they have to be confirmed by the council before they actually serve? And then are they acting until they're confirmed, or do they actually have to be confirmed before they can take the job?
I think that would depend upon whether it was reappointment or
Yeah,
not.
if it's a new appointment,
Yeah.
they don't act until they've been confirmed.
Okay.
Sworn.
It's sworn.
Sworn.
Yeah, confirmed, published, and sworn. If it's a reappointment, then they just continue.
Okay. So I asked that because I don't know if anybody else, I'm sure that there are some, I know there are some in this room who were following and who tracked what happens at the state level. And for a number of years, we had state agency commissioners who were not confirmed, but were acting, but were still doing the job. And so I wanted to make sure, well, I just wanted to better understand if that could happen in the event that, we have a new, and I know this position's going away, but I'm using this as an example because the position's going away. We have a new city coordinator coming in. The city council chooses not to take up their appointment. Does that person then not serve?
Well,
If they're new.
Well.
If they're a new
it's-
appointment.
it's a new, but the workaround is they could be appointed as an acting or an interim, whatever you try. Interim, they could be appointed as an interim under the charter, which has a time limit on it. And is it still 90 days? I can't remember.
That's
Under-
under AIDS. It's under AIDS.
But, so there's a provision for that when, for example, if somebody dies in office, the fire chief dies, but you want
Right.
a fire chief, so you appoint somebody, typically from within the department, who becomes the acting or the interim. They can come from the outside. Even though when I was interim, I had retired for some reason, I came back in. But that's a way to get somebody in position on a temporary basis until they can get permanent replacement.
But so unlike what happened at the state level where where it was what it was, there was one party in control of the Senate which confirmed, and then you had a different party of the governor, and the Senate opted not to confirm that. In this instance, the city council could choose not to take action, and then, unlike at the state level, the person would not be able to take the position if they are a new appointment. Correct. Okay. Okay, that's really helpful, because I was confused because I had thought at a previous meeting I asked a similar question and was told that they could serve, so I'm glad I asked, unless I misunderstood or I asked the question poorly, which is very possible. So I guess then going to my comments, I do believe that there should be a third option, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I would like to hear, as great as the conversation has been here, I would like to hear, honestly, from the public. And I know I've said that at previous meetings too. And I know that there's a process for that and we have to come up with something, but this would be a really good opportunity for us to hear how the public thinks, like when they contact their city council member, if they're getting the support they need for trash pickup, for example. And so to Chair Kozak's point about public works does affect us all. So I would be inclined to see in our third column, the commissioner or the director of public works as well. I think that absolutely makes sense. But I do think at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of people who probably just want their trash picked up and they want their water to work and they want to be able to call someone for a service and have that service be responded to efficiently and effectively. And so who appoints whom, I guess, while it's an important conversation to have, I don't know, I guess it's the constituent services professional in me. I want to make sure that the service is provided. And so the politicking, and I understand that's why we're here, is it's important to have these conversations, but I would, again, be inclined to support a third option that includes at least the Public Works Director as well as those in the middle column. But I could be persuaded to include more. But I do think at a minimum, it should be the 3 listed plus the fire chief, police chief, and then public works. But I do think that we as a commission should be engaging with the public as well. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Clay.
Thank you, Chair Garcia. I want to reiterate what Commissioner Ginder said about process. And I think we're setting up 2 sort of guardrails, one on either side. One would be the left column and one would be the middle column, and then there's anything in between. And I think we present those to the council and hear what the council's view is and present them to the mayor and hear the mayor's view as well. Then again, it comes back to us. And we could have a public hearing at that point, or we could come up with a final proposal and then have a public hearing on the final proposal. That's also up to us. In terms of left column versus center column, I actually come down more on the side of the left column. I think the council should have the ability to confirm most of those positions. There's a couple of ways that I would tweak it, however. The Regulatory Services Department is an accidental charter department. It was not a charter department at all until 2009, when the charter was amended by ordinance to make it a charter department. The reason for that was not because people were looking for a solid government structure or looking to improve the processes of the city. The reason for that was that the person that everybody wanted to be the director of regulatory services didn't want to work for the city coordinator. So what did they do? They really wanted this person in there, so they changed the charter. Very, very bad idea. So I think we can fix that accidental creation of a department by taking out regulatory services. I'm not sure what to do about emergency management. We're looking into whether or not there's a state statute. There is a state statute which says that the director of emergency management in the city must be appointed by the mayor. But I think Commissioner Ginder thinks there's a special law on point as well. So I think we need further work to figure out what we have flexibility to do there. But to me, it would make sense that emergency services would be under the Public Safety Commissioner, if we have that flexibility. I don't know if we do or not. And I would even add one to the column in the left. I would add the City Finance Officer. The biggest role the council has is the budget and the money. And it seems to me they ought to have a say in who appoints the finance officer. So I might delete one or two. I would certainly leave civil rights in the left-hand column, because in this time of very challenging, this time of challenges to civil rights nationally, I don't want to be in a position of demoting the Civil Rights Department to a non-charter department. You can make arguments on both sides for Commissioner of Health and Commissioner of Health and Assessor. To some, and say, well, people don't care who the assessor is, but others would say, you know, the assessor is the person who has probably the most say in what your personal property taxes are going to be, and you might want to have a voice in that. So I would tend to leave the left-hand column mostly undamaged, but I would play around with emergency management, regulatory services, and probably add the finance officer.
Thank you. For just transparency, I would, in addition to the middle column, add CPED and Public Works. And I think this is interesting, and there was something else that I was gonna mention, and I totally forgot. So, do people have additional questions, or you, Commissioner Kozak?
This is a question either for Mr. Carl or Commissioner Bieber. Maybe we should tell some of the folks that the appointment process and confirmation has a rather checkered history, as I recall. I don't remember what it was, but it was not that long ago, maybe 25 years, when they went to the executive committee, did they not?
1984.
84. And that was considered a big reform. And the executive committee it was the mayor.
Don Frazier, the mayor, the council president, the council,
Ways and Means.
nope, not Ways and Means, that was on DET. It was the minority leader. So
Oh.
this is why council had to elect a minority.
When there
leader.
was a minority.
Right, so when there was a majority of minority leaders of the council, if all of the council were not of the same political party, then they would elect a minority leader for the minority of the party or parties that were represented on the council, and that person who's minority leader got a seat on the executive committee.
And prior to that, did the council confirm everybody?
I don't know that.
No.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yes, I mean, everybody that was mentioned in the charter, as well as, I think a few other charter people went through the full council approval process. The historical thing, you know, when Frazier was in, Frazier was pushing very hard to get a stronger merit system, and after years of working, the compromise was that smaller group then took over the appointment process for certain department heads. And
If the executive committee approved, then it was a done deal, is that right?
no,
Or did they have to go to the full
and
council?
they went to full council, but the idea was that getting some of that, and the mayor still nominated for the executive, for the council, for the executive committee, the mayor still nominated. And then when they got the approval from that group, we went to the full council, but there was a little bit of a feeling that there would be more buy-in. We already had two of the council leaders weighing in and approving the nomination for the full council.
The way it worked in practice, under the charter before plain language, was that the mayor made nominations and it went to the mayor's committee. I called it the mayor's committee because the mayor was automatic chair of the executive committee. So the mayor nominated to his own committee, a nomination of the department head. The executive committee then appointed, and that appointment was referred to the full council. The council referred to their standing committee for a public hearing to get public input on this appointment. And the appointment wasn't finalized until the public hearing was done, a recommendation was forwarded to the full council, and the full council voted to ratify the appointment by the executive committee of the person nominated by the mayor. So it was a very complex process to get the appointment done. My understanding too, which was only maybe ever done once during my tenure, almost done a second time, was the reverse was true to get rid of a charter department head. You'd have to go through that same process in reverse between all those bodies to remove the charter department head. So once in place, they were there.
I would not recommending that as an alternative.
Right, it was a good thing that that was mixed.
But I would suggest, just one more thing. Commissioner Perry, I agree that we don't need 14 bosses. However, the confirmation, after the confirmation process is over and the person's in place, the 13 people are no longer the boss, other than the power of the purse.
And power of policy, Commissioner.
And, well, politics.
Well, no policies, they can adopt enterprise policies that
Yes,
dictate how
yes.
they deliver services.
And go through an ordinance.
Yep, yep.
So,
Just a quick question. Commissioner Hinder, did you support the middle column? Is that your?
I said for purposes of discussion, I'm leaning towards the middle column plus, some, whatever kind of group feels should be added on for a third discussion point.
Okay.
So I'm trying to remove my personal things, that what would be a good thing to send over to the council to really have a full discussion. So for me, that's those two, and then plus kind of what looks like a third option, which is at least, fire, and police, as well as public works and CPAD, and maybe a couple of more per Commissioner Clegg, and just kind of see, the exact number in that column really isn't important, but I think is to have an idea from the council, where do you feel in this range? Let's hear your thoughts, the mayor, let's hear your thoughts, and what this range is. And then, we'll all have our own ideas about what, when we come back after we've heard that, we'll have a public hearing at some point, kind of say, okay, what do we think about this? And so, I like to say my current position isn't written in stone, but I have a leaning, but let's hear discussion from the elected officials about why it's important what they do, as well as later on from the public, and then kind of say, I'm swayed, I'm not swayed, whatever it is. So that's kind of, if I can just go on, so we have a meeting on May 7th, and we'll get a report from the chairs on this committee, and one of the things that I would like to do at that meeting then is to get approval to, work with Mr. Powell to try and find a fashion in which we can get elections together in an election year. Hopefully we can be able to do that. But then, then have the authority from the commission say, send over these three options in, and so I will come to you with, written out three options that we'll present and talk about and say, let's have a motion at some point to say, let's send this over and let's try and, work with get a time set up and so we can have this discussion. So that's how I see this working as we move on from today.
Thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
Commissioner Knight?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions, just more about I guess logistics. Would any change we make to, and I'm not sure who I'm asking this to, but would any change we make to the confirmation, to who gets confirmed by whom or appointed by whom, would that impact the office's staff levels or how that office
No.
brings up? So how nobody would lose their job based on any change that we propose, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
No one would, yeah.
Okay, no. Okay, thank you. And then, again, just thinking about having worked with state agencies who propose budgets, would changing how they are appointed versus confirmed, versus hired, would it change the process for them submitting budget requests?
No.
So it would be the same process. The only thing that would change would be how the director of the office gets to be the director or the head or whatever. Okay, so nothing,
And who the director reports to.
Yeah, include director reports, right, yeah.
okay.
Well, wait, wouldn't the director, I mean, I thought we were talking about who confirms, I think that who the director reports to. Where, that's not on here, right?
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
But the charter department heads report to the mayor.
Unless the mayor delegates it to someone else, which he has done through executive orders.
Commissioner Flake?
Nothing
Oh,
else.
no, never come. I remembered what I was gonna say. I would add to Commissioner Nine's question in terms of who appoints what and confirms what would also not affect constituent services in any way. And furthermore, the government structure amendment also actually gave staff to the council as legislative staff. So there was that addition. And the amendment, the idea for the amendment was to kind of who did what, who executed, who made policy, who oversaw what, was very blurred, because you could have somebody, a business person, for example, go to mayor and go to regulatory services, or maybe go to a council member. There were, because the lines weren't as clear, they can still go to all those places now. But because the lines weren't as clear, and there could be, when it comes to things like appointment, when it comes to things like policymaking, it was less clear about who would make policy. Would a department head need to, would they feel pressure from a council member to meet the needs of of a constituent group? And feel like perhaps their job's in jeopardy? It wasn't clear. And with the executive mayor, the idea is that there's accountability, and it's more direct as to, who appoints to the mayor or reports to the mayor, or how they would delegate it. Meanwhile, people can still go to the city department to ask questions. They can go to their council member to ask questions. The council now has legislative staff to be able to work that out and work with the mayor's staff. So the idea was to improve those clear lines. Do we have?
Oh, sorry, just one follow-up question, Madam Chair, and something that you just said, I think is really, really important, that these changes would not affect constituent services in any way. And I just, again, would appreciate clarification, this would also not affect city services in any way, correct? Any changes, like it wouldn't slow, my trash is gonna get picked up on Tuesday still, like, okay.
The structure, the structure, everything else stays the same. Obviously, personalities impact the structure, so if
But we're not
mayor
talking
appoints
about
somebody,
those.
if the mayor appoints somebody incompetent, well, something may suffer. But it's not, structurally, nothing changes. The structure should not affect any constituent services or anything like that.
I think that's gonna be that incumbent upon us, Commissioner, for us to let the public know that when we are talking about it could be a major change, it could be a minor change, depending on what that third column is, that things that will still get done in the same way that they have been done. The only thing that is changing is more the process by which the the person leading the agency or the department or whatever is appointed. But trash will still get picked up on Tuesdays or whatever day. Water's still gonna come in. If I need to call 311 because there's a dead rabbit in my yard, which did happen, those services will still be available regardless of what we decide here.
Just a quick comment on that. I think that's true, the services still will be available, but how they work and how smoothly they operate, I think the council would argue that their input into who is appointed, their confirmation of who is appointed, the hope would be to make that run more smoothly for their constituents. Their goal is to have things run smoothly for their constituents. And while, yes, the structure doesn't relegate that, and what Chair Garcia is saying is, we're not talking about personalities here, but in reality, the people who get appointed, whether they're competent or incompetent, who will matter in terms of how those services are provided.
And the government structure, technically, it's supposed to improve constituent services, because there's clarity, there's not a tension or even a outright conflict between the executive and the legislative about who's, you know, putting forth what, or who is, I don't want to, who, the council, the example that I used is that somebody, a council member could go to a department head and the department head could feel pressure. That still could all happen, but constituent services can be more effective and more responsive because it cuts out, hopefully, any of that conflict. We go to the department head, get policy input, ask their legislative staff to look into, you know, to research, do the research that they do, but it's clear that it's the mayor, it's the mayor's appointment, it's the mayor that has that, that ability. So I would argue that because we know that, that would make constituent services less bulky, perhaps, ideally. And I also, just to throw out there for consideration, and one of the, since we want to present like these three options and have this dialogue with the council and mayor, I think the question that you present, Commissioner Doherty, is how has constituent services been affected? How has, we may think that the council confirming would affect constituent services, but if all the services are still provided and there's nothing else would change except reporting to the mayor, we can find out from the council, having kind of lived under the ordinance, but living into this current structure and looking at what has worked, what hasn't worked. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's too bulky to go through all of the confirmation process and then do constituents. I mean, we around this table may care because we're around this table for a reason, but would your average person, how would that really impact them? Is there another question?
How would you suggest, or Commissioner Ginger laid out what we ought to recommend to the full commission for intended on to the council and to the mayor. So how would you make the motion?
I guess, I guess I'll make a motion that we forward to the full commission a recommendation that we present for discussion purposes only to the council and the mayor, three options that would include in the left column, middle column, and then I'll say for the third column, just, this is for discussion purposes, that would include also, or at least, Public Works and CPED. And then have those three be the marker for discussion, and at the full commission, we can discuss if we, if you want to make any changes to that, but at least just to send it over to the full commission, that we would have those three columns, with the third column being everything that's in the middle plus CPED Public Works.
I would say, I would agree with that, except I would also request that perhaps in that, with the thought of adding some others based on communication with the mayor and the council. For example, like what Commissioner Clegg said, the city finance office. I mean, that might be another possibility, and to keep it under.
Well, we don't have a second yet for discussion purposes, but
This is just, sorry, I'm sorry.
But I would say just have those two, because when we get older, when we send it to the counselor, then we're gonna get their input. Do you wanna have, for example, finance? Do you wanna have, it's gotta be everybody, we get to hear from them. I'm just putting down markers just for discussion purposes. So we actually have the two guardrails and then a middle one, so that we can say, just for discussion purposes. So I'm not wed to those two only. Again, I'm setting this forward for just discussion purposes for the commission, as well as when we send it forward to the mayor and the city council.
If appropriate, I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
And so just for clarification, the motion is to recommend, to present three options, the far left column, the middle column, and then the middle column plus Public Works.
And CPED.
CPED.
Yes. We can put that in one.
I would like to speak in favor of the motion by, we're not taking anything off the table. That's not our role. We're not,
Yet.
well, our role is to conform the charter to the ordinance. So there's, which we will do under conversation with the current council and mayor in public. So we, as this civic group, are not taking anything off the table. We're simply presenting these three options for consideration.
And Chair Brackett. Thank you. So I, Chair Kinder, I support the motion, and because I think having something to base the conversation off of and start the discussion is really important. And I think this gives us a starting point to have that third alternative. Is it perfect? No. Is there more? Sure. It could. I don't think we should necessarily take anything off, but I think it gives us a good starting point for us as a commission to develop a position. And rather than going around and around talking about each of the individual pieces that we support, at least right now, because I don't think we're all 100% in alignment just yet. This gives us a place to at least start to move towards compromise. So, Chair Kinder, I support your motion, so thank you.
Did you have something to add?
No.
Well, and some of us may not think the same way tomorrow or next week after thinking about it. Commissioner Cooper?
I generally like the idea, and I think it makes sense to have, like we've been saying, the guardrails and then something in the middle. I wonder about adding, in addition to CPED and Public Works, adding regulatory services, which a number of people spoke in favor of adding, and then civil rights was also explicitly mentioned, I think. So I just wonder about adding a few more to the, you know, what would be on the right-hand side.
I don't want to, we have a motion on the floor. I think if I'm understanding Commissioner Ginder, it would be presented for discussion, which could include, regulatory and civil rights among discussion items.
Yeah, I guess probably the way to present it would be as an amendment to the motion, would be.
Okay.
Just for explanation of the basis of the motion is I would fully expect at full commissioning that there would be
Yes.
discussion about, well, I want, I think the third, or the middle one, whatever, should look like X. And we're gonna end up
That's
having
what I was
motions
trying to
on
say.
that, and amendments on that, to try and do that. And so I'm not necessarily opposed right now to do it, but I think at the full commission, then we'll have that chance to weigh in on pros or cons of reg services, the accidental part, finance, which is not mentioned in any of these.
Right.
And I would just say, we're looking at the ordinance, and we're picking ultimately what we think is gonna work best for the charter and the city.
Right. I agree, and I think my suggestion was just trying to reflect what I had heard from a number of other commissioners in terms of like where that middle ground might lie, because I think the way that we present it to the full commission will come with some sort of like imprimatur of
Yes,
this
definitely.
work group's like
And then-
consensus as loose as that term is.
Commissioner Cooper, I'll make very clear that it's for discussion purposes only.
That's- yeah.
There's no recommendation.
There's no written recommendation.
Yeah.
This is the middle ground,
Yeah.
it's a discussion point.
That's fair.
And by definition, consensus or compromise is where neither side gets everything they want. So is there anyone else who wants to speak to the motion?
To be clear, I'm sorry, Commissioner Cooper, your motion.
No, not withdrawing that motion.
Yeah.
I would still accept a second on that motion.
I would second, it's an amendment to the motion,
Right,
correct?
that's
Okay.
correct.
I would second the amendment to Commissioner Cooper's, to Commissioner Ginger's motion.
Commissioner Clay?
I'd like to speak against the amendment and in favor of the original motion. And I was the one who wanted to add things like civil rights and finance, et cetera. But I don't think we're trying to come to a decision or a recommendation of what we as a charter commission are recommending. The council will probably come back and say, we really want to stick with the left-hand column. And the mayor will say, we want to stick with the middle column. And then we'll have to decide what we're going to do and what we're going to put on the ballot. But in terms of setting up the discussion points, we've set the end posts and the range is in the middle. And we're welcoming comment to get there. But I don't think we should try and finesse it, because otherwise you'd be hearing from me 45 minutes about why we should include the finance.
I would like to hear your 45 minutes on why we should include the finance department. Yeah, I think I was just, like I said, I was just trying to, there were a number of commissioners that had included regulatory services. And so I think to the extent that this is a proposal, my suggestion just to add those two is also just as a starting point for when we bring it. We've been working on this as a work group for several months. When we bring it to the rest of the commission, I think it would, I'm not trying to represent consensus, because I know that there's not consensus, we've all shared lots of thoughts, but.
Would anybody else like to speak to the amendment? I guess we will find out what commissioners think. So let's move as to whether the motion is amended.
Roll call or please?
I think, I don't,
Roll call.
yeah, let's do roll call.
Commissioner Cooper?
Aye.
Warby?
Aye.
Ginger?
No.
Nye?
Aye.
Mary?
No.
I'm sorry?
We have 3 ayes and 4 nays.
Kozak isn't a formal member of this group.
I have a amendment to propose to the motion, and that is simply instead, when we present to the full charter commission, instead of calling this charter commission proposal in terms of the third column, that it just be charter commission discussion points. So because right now, as it appears that this committee is proposing these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items. And I don't think that's the intent of what we're doing.
Can we vote on the motion and then discuss how it's,
It's an amendment to the motion.
oh, it is an amendment?
Yeah, she's looking at it.
Need a
Is there a
second?
second? Is there a second?
I haven't heard one.
I would second.
For discussion, and I'm against what, but I'm not exactly sure how to answer this, but when we move this forward, my intention is not to have these kind of column where it says COA proposed amendment. It'll be a much less, it'll be a descriptive amendment, but not the recommended from any group. This is brought forward as a compilation of what's in the current ordinance. And so we'll work on a name that is neutral on that, as the third column will not be anything more than just a discussion recommendation from the commission. It's not,
That's my amendment, to just change that term proposal to discussion
yeah,
recommendation.
just discussion, for discussion purposes, the third option is, trying to make it a neutral thing.
That would work.
Clerk Carr?
Vote on the amendment all you want. This was a column, this is a thing I put together, so I'm gonna speak as the owner of it. It's not yours, I created it, and I created it before. Why it says CAO proposed amendment is because this is before, it should say, this is the government structure ordinance.
Right.
So I would suggest all columns need to be redone.
Yes,
The far left should
exactly.
say city charter current, the middle should say government structure ordinance, and the third column, if you wish, can say work group discussion points. But if you're gonna move this forward, all the columns should be corrected.
Yes, and I think that's where,
And that's my intention, so we can,
So this would be a friendly amendment?
yes, and I accept it as a friendly amendment, and we'll just do those columns in the fashion.
Commissioner Clark?
I was just gonna say, ultimately, after our public hearing, after we hear from the council, and after we decide on what we want to put forward, there will be a third column, but it's premature to have it up there now.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak to the friendly amendment? Shall
No,
we-
it was accepted as friendly, so I don't.
Oh, so by default, it's accepted?
I've accepted the amendment.
So now we vote on the motion.
We voted with my original motion.
Any more discussion on the motion before us? Are we ready for the roll call vote?
Commissioner Cooper? Aye. Doherty?
Aye.
Kinder?
Aye.
Nye?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
And Chair Garcia?
Aye.
We have 7.
Terrific. I believe that concludes the business in front of us for today. So I adjourn the meeting. And Chair Clay, Commissioner Clay can take appointments for his 45 minutes. His 45 minutes. Yeah.